it's going to go. Like, have a conversation over coffee and see what happens with a brand new stranger.
Well,
For me and Sarah.
I really don't meet strangers, Tina. I mean, and if you're a friend of Ben's, you're a friend of mine. So,
oh, look at that.
yeah.
Can we
it's
put
true.
that on a t-shirt?
Yeah.
Actually, that'd be a great slogan for the show.
If you're a friend of Ben's, you're a friend of mine.
There
Yeah.
you go.
I think that was used against me at some point. It was like FOB,
Oh.
and like, oh, this is a friend of Ben, is it? You know, it's like, I remember that being a thing in a toxic culture I was in.
Like human negativity. Okay, well, we'll workshop that.
Yeah.
We'll workshop that later in the podcast.
Yeah, maybe there's some trauma there we should work through. Yeah, Sarah, we did a podcast yesterday and we got deep. It was, I don't usually do this, but I stopped and was like, "Hey, are you okay?" Like we're like getting into this. They're like, "Oh no, this is fine. This is good." She was great, but it was like, woof. I was like, man, we got deep quick. So that's all right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens.
Well, those are the best kind. Those are the best kind of conversations.
There you go.
I like them.
All right, so today we have with us the amazing Sarah Armstrong, who I met. How did we meet? Oh, I know. We were, Judson was trying to get me to come work at Ensemble, and Sarah was there, and we spent like a whole day together in Miami. I think that was what it was.
That's right.
You and me
That's
and
right. Yeah.
Shannon.
Yeah.
And I
That's right.
loved it. It was amazing. But it just didn't work.
But he didn't join
Ensemble. The timing didn't work. No, I didn't, and I love those guys. But you were so helpful, and I don't know, it was great. It was one of those moments, Tina. I don't know if I told you about this, where I was like, they were like, articulate what do you want to do, and it was like, I don't like. It was early on. I left Helprise and I was on my own. And I was like, I'm not sure. It's like I couldn't articulate it, but that was probably the sign. If I remember correctly.
That's right, exactly. That's how you know, right? Like, stall on the answer.
Right. Yeah, I didn't really know what to say. And you know me, I usually know what to say. Yeah. So Sarah, tell us,
get something in your
tell us what you're doing today. Like, where are you at today? And then we'll go back in time. So give people a little bit of like, who's Sarah today?
Sure. So right now I'm the CEO of Trend Health Partners. We are a payment integrity organization that sits between payers and providers and helps resolve payment integrity issues for both payers and providers. Like I said, we have some great technology. We have some great services, great dedicated, very knowledgeable team and we really enjoy that whole ecosystem, right? Understanding both the provider, rev cycle, organization, what are those pain points, the payer side, how they operate, what are their pain points. And so we try to facilitate payment resolution between both entities.
Oh my God. I don't know if I realized it. Wow. Intermediary between the two. That is interesting.
Yeah.
There's so many thoughts here.
Yes, a lot of the breakdown is just communication styles, right? And the way, there's a different glossary that payers use and providers use in a lot of cases when they're trying to resolve something. And so we help just bridge that language gap, help them come to the table and be like, hey, this is what's actually going on with this account or this set of accounts. And yeah, it's awesome. I love it. It has been very enlightening for me personally. I didn't have experience with the payer side prior to joining Trend, and we can talk about how I got here, but just the more I understand about the healthcare ecosystem, the more interesting and fun it is. Great people on both sides of the house. And one thing I would say is I grew up as a revenue cycle operator. And whether somebody intentionally or unintentionally taught me, you just fight with the payers at every turn. Like that's your job as a revenue cycle leader. Just fight with everything you can because you don't have a lot of leverage. I've come to realize how that very often didn't really serve me as a revenue cycle operator. So we can talk more about that. But yeah, it's been a great journey. Love the folks over here, and we're just having so much fun doing really cool stuff.
That's awesome. Look at the smile. Like she is like in it. So great. Like I like you can tell like there's joy here. It's great.
Yeah.
I feel like I've come
And
I've
Ben's
come like
astonished
full
by
circle. Yeah, because
Speechless.
I feel like I had your thoughts where it's like, yeah, we should work together. We can fix this. And then I've come full circle to like the other side where it's like, no, I don't think we will. I think we'll come. There'll be small things that will get aligned on, but there's so many problems with the incentives that it just feels like. So it'd be good to talk through this because I feel like I used to want to like try to solve the relationship, but realized like most times the problem isn't necessarily like the relationship I might have with my rep or my people I'm working with, but just the incentives just aren't there, or they don't have full control, or there's just, I don't know, there's so many issues there. So I don't know, I've probably gone full circle. And then I've gotten probably disillusioned by the fact that like it feels like an arms race at this point, where they're
Right.
arming
That
themselves
and
with
that's
automation to the nth degree. And so then you're like, well, we have to arm ourselves with automation because they're gonna kill us because they have more resources.
I think that there's some I think you would be surprised at the reality of what's happening on the payer side. I think they are just as resource strapped. I think they struggle with technology in very similar ways. I think they're not as nefarious as people think they are on the provider side. And I agree that the fix, like fixing it, like what does that even mean? I don't, like that's a very nebulous and big picture comment. But what I would say is, but we can do good things every day in our interactions with with the spirit of let's just get it right. The provider wants to be paid for services they provide, and the payer wants to make sure that the member is having a great experience and they're paying for appropriate medical care. And, those, so if we can just like get to what are we all trying to accomplish here? And do it at at a very granular level, I think that we can actually do good. Can we fix it? I don't know. There's a lot of other entities that have to come to the table, but can we do good work? Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, certainly there's ways to do it. There's ways to get small changes. I went to I don't know, Sarah, did you go to the class invited me like a couple years ago to go to their like payer provider summit? And I
Yeah,
got
we
there and it
just came
was
from there last week.
okay. Well, my takeaway, and this is not no shot against class. I just told them like this is pointless on a lot of levels, and because I felt like there's no unless it's changed, there's no representation from like a United CEO or Aetna CEO. There was no one higher than like a VP of a region. And what I've learned, because we used to bring I used to bring like a couple payer leaders, and it'd be like a VP of a region of like multiple states, like at United. Super nice guy. He's great. They're great to have. There's, they're talking through their problems, like you said, they're talking through their side of problems, which is helpful. But it turns out, like every time it'd be like, well, I can't, I can do something in my region, but but especially, and I'm probably more like on United than anything else because they're so large is like
Hmm.
they're the way they're structured is like they can't do anything. They're not going to do anything nationally, like unless the CEO gets involved. So my thing with class was like, we can have these discussions, but the reality is like you got three small, tiny payers that aren't going to be able to, they may be able to do something, but it doesn't affect the larger whole. And the larger payers you have here, they're all like too low of a level. They can't make decisions that will change something. So my struggle was like, it's just, I get it. I know what you're trying to do. It's like, it's altruistic, but I don't know if it really changes anything. So I don't
Well,
know.
I
That's
think
where I've been like
yeah,
disillusioned probably.
yeah, I think from my point of view, they are changing things, but they're changing them in the domain in which they can impact change. And so what you're talking about, Ben, is, the heavy hitters, the high executives to come together and do radical change in a short period of time. And while everyone would hope for that, that would be amazing. I think that what we can't ignore is the ability to do small things in our specific areas of expertise with the goal of impacting the larger picture.
Right.
And So I actually found the class conference very uplifting. There are amazing people that are thinking outside the box, that are coming to the table and saying, "Hey, I am willing to do the work and give the energy and, just mental thought processes around how can we do this differently in this particular box, which is the box that I can impact." And if we all do that, eventually, in my point of view, eventually we'll make bigger and bigger and bigger impact. But we have to start with, with my 20 square feet. What can I do with my 20 square feet to make it better? And I find that a lot of conversations kind of boil down to, well, if you can't fix the 100 yards, then I'm not going to fix my 20 square feet. And I just feel like that attitude really isn't going to get us anywhere. If we can just do what we can do, then hopefully the small efforts, the baby steps will impact the greater good. And until we all get tired, I guess, until we get disillusioned, maybe. But I am young on my journey and having a great time and really seeing how we can impact, like I said, just these little microcosms of members and providers and these small groups, not small payers, but small subsections of these payers. And, hopefully we can do what we can.
Yeah, I like it. I like what your attitude is. That's probably why they didn't invite me back, Sarah, to be honest. So I just didn't, I probably was a little too cynical and I'd probably seen too much. I don't know, it's interesting. But like anything, there's good players and there's bad players. And
That's
there's
right.
going to be people that are
Right.
going to want to do stuff and legitimately want to do something and legitimately sometimes can't do anything, right? Like their systems are all messed up and they haven't changed, whatever system they have and it doesn't really work. Or what we find often is we had I don't know, this is probably a year ago, Tina, a year and a half ago, we did a forum and we had a guy come that was on the consulting side for payers. But he talked about just like what they're going, because he's seeing it all, all over the place. So he was talking about more like what's some of the things they're up against, but also that a lot of the payers are very siloed, where it's like there's a contracting person who doesn't really talk to the people who actually like administer the claim, administer claims. And those people don't really, so it's just like anything. Like this is probably like hospitals, right? They're pretty siloed, and sometimes people have power to
Yeah.
change things, and sometimes they don't. So I agree with you on the point. I don't think it's nefarious as people think. I think there are groups that probably are, but those are probably much more the minority than everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay,
for
that
sure.
was enough on that. Maybe we'll get back to that, but
Okay.
That's enough.
well, it just you could go down a rabbit hole that gets me into negativity. Sarah, tell us. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Tell us about where you grew up and family and all that stuff, and then let's go through it. Let's hear about Sarah.
Tell the whole story. So I grew up in a small town in eastern Kentucky, Ashland, Kentucky. My dad is a retired steelworker. My mother is a librarian. She just recently retired. She worked for the local library system for over 50 years.
50 years as a librarian?
That is my dream. That is my
Yeah.
dream. That's what I like.
Yeah.
That's not
mean,
don't say that. That's not true.
Oh my God, I would love it. Maybe that's what I'll do when I retire. I'll just work at the library.
Trader Joe's.
Work
I
at the
thought
library.
we were sitting Trader Joe's.
Oh, yesterday we were talking me into a Trader Joe's position. Because
the library. The library is so great. And,
I love
and it's
it.
so funny. People think now like, oh, with Amazon and, downloadable books, who goes to the library? And they are such a center of education and support for communities. People have no idea. People have no idea. Anyway, so, my mother got her master's degree and ran the local library system as I was growing. I worked there. Like she would, I was as a child was someone that you had to keep busy, right? So I'm like, high energy. So she put me to work at the library. I, worked the desk and shelved books and all that kind of stuff from a very, very young age. So I just grew up around knowledge and being interested in learning new things. But in Eastern Kentucky, there's not a lot of employment options, but they had a local hospital. So I got a degree in health administration, thought, maybe I can get a job at the hospital. And like every revenue cycle person that I know, I bounced around a bit, went to UK a little, went to U of L a little, and then finished my degree in a small,
Wait, there feels like there's
organization.
something there. There's something there. Like, what do you mean you just bounced around? You just skipped over
Yeah,
this
like
real quick.
yeah. So I mean, I went to UK right out of high school and did a semester at UK. Followed a boy
I would
to
say
U
bigger
of L.
town, bigger
Yeah,
city,
yeah,
young
yeah.
Knew
man.
it.
Yeah, followed a boy, which, is never a good idea.
It's never a good idea.
Never a good idea.
Never.
But, what do you know? You're 18, 19 years
You're
old.
in
What do you know?
love.
Yeah, whatever. And
That's the real thing. Whatever.
yeah, whatever. And great. I mean, he's a great guy. Like it just didn't work out, right? And so went back to UK and took a few more semesters there, and then met my first husband. And he was a little older than me and was established in the Ashland area. So I left UK and finished my degree in health administration at this little town or this little college called Shawnee State University, and had just a great experience. It was a class size of, 25
Shawnee
people
State.
in my
I don't know if I know that.
Shawnee State in Portsmouth, Ohio. I don't even know if it still exists, but I had some great professors.
You don't even know if it exists. We gotta look this. We gotta look this
I
up.
don't know.
Tonight.
I mean, I'm sure it does. I'm sure
Shawnee
it does.
State.
I mean, the next
Um,
next episode, you'll see us. Ben and I will be wearing the Shawnee State college sweatshirts.
Tiny little community college, not a community college, but university
I
in
even
Portsmouth,
spelled
Ohio.
it correctly for the record. I even spelled it correctly.
Excellent. Yeah. And it was a brand new program. So what's interesting is in Portsmouth there was also another health system, and so they created this health administration program for the non-traditional students. So it was kind of geared for people that worked in healthcare to go back, at nights and get their bachelor's degree. So I did a lot of night classes, was working as the manager of the Texas Roadhouse at the same time.
Nice.
Yes.
And I mean,
Love
yeah.
Texas
Loves the
Roadhouse.
Texas Roadhouse, don't you?
My
That's his
my
jam.
oldest is like, she's all in. Yeah, loves that place.
Yeah. So got a degree and, had that conversation with the Texas Roadhouse folks. They were like, you could go do this and, have a career in restaurant management, or you can, use your degree. And I was like, I didn't, I loved the time that I spent at the Roadhouse. I made great friends. We had great chemistry at that restaurant, but ultimately chose to get a job in my field. Actually, that's not true. My first job out of college I was the city clerk treasurer of Flatwoods, Kentucky. So I was the person that kept all the ordinances, did, payroll for all the policemen and the public utility workers, collected property taxes and all
that. Is that an elected position, or is that
no, you serve at the pleasure of the mayor. The mayor is elected, but you serve at the pleasure of the mayor. And
did you get to say that like the West Wing?
Yeah,
I serve at the pleasure of the mayor.
I do.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah. Learned so much about local government and how all of that works. Just really, really grateful for that experience. Took people's water bills and their property tax bills back when people walked in and paid you in cash. That was how people paid their. Yeah,
Here's
walked
my $50.
in and paid in cash. Yeah, we didn't even take credit cards. You couldn't even you couldn't pay with a card way back then.
It's like check or cash. That's it.
Yeah, that was it. We had a little night deposit box. People could put it in an envelope and slide it down in a little night deposit box. Yeah, so great. I was 25, 26 years old.
Wait, are you
hilarious.
still working at Texas Roadhouse at this point?
No, left the Roadhouse for the government position.
For the government job.
And yeah.
So how long did you do this
for the government job? Probably 5 years. 5 years or
5
so.
years.
Yeah. Learned so much. I was 25 years old and was the person responsible for locking people's water off for non-payment. Well, you learn a lot about society when you're the person between a person and their, in their hot water. Just to learn a lot about that. Anyway. That was a great experience. Learned so much, and then got a job in at the local hospital. They were hiring for a business analyst, So I applied and got that job in the business office. And like every revenue cycle person that I know, I started in the cash posting department. So like somebody was out on FMLA when I started, and they were like, Sarah, can you go learn how to post cash? So for, I think, 12 weeks, I sat in the cash posting office and keyed remits. That was what I did in an old SMS Unity system. That was what we were on at King's Daughters when I started there. Yeah.
You're at King's Daughters?
Yeah.
You know, Ted Syverson's there right now.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah. I've been
I've
been gone from Ashland for a long time.
That's funny.
So, yeah. And then worked my way up, implemented a scheduling software when I was there, got tapped to do that, and got a little bit of the bug of like software implementation. And then that went relatively well. And so they asked me to do an Epic install. So I was the project manager of for the revenue cycle of an Epic install back in, what was this? 2007, maybe, before Epic even had a foundation system. So the Epic installation process was design, build, validate. So I mean, wow, what did I learn from that? It was like a crazy intense time to implement Epic back then. So I always say I've been using Epic since before Epic was cool.
Is it cool?
You definitely were using Epic before it was cool. That's something else right there. That's early.
Yeah. Early days. Yeah, so worked at King's Daughters, worked my way up as the revenue cycle director until 2012. So I worked at King's Daughters a long time. 2012, I went to Try Health. I locked my fur babies in their kennels, or they would also be around here. So
I could hear it purring. I could hear that cat purring.
I was like trying to push him away.
Nice.
I pushed him on the floor.
Nice.
Sorry, everybody.
I love it.
Back.
I love it.
I'm gonna walk over there and get him out of here. Hold on. You guys just keep talking. I can be attached and keep going.
Why don't you mute your mic?
So I mean,
not you, Sarah. You keep talking. We got Tina here. I don't know what's happening.
So let's see, where was I? Oh, so at King's Daughters, left King's Daughters, went to Try Health in the Cincinnati area. So my youngest son was 14. So we up and moved from Ashland. My oldest son was in college and moved to Northern Kentucky, and I worked at Try Health. Great experience there. And then went from Try Health to Ensemble. And when I left Ensemble, took some time to, enjoy life a little.
You just skipped over like 10 years, Sarah. What are you doing? You just like boom, boom, boom. First off, we didn't even know you had a kid, and then you're like, I have a teenager in college. Like, wait a second. So when did you? So you were at? You guys back up a little bit because you.
No, we had a first husband. Remember, she used the phrase "first husband."
No, I know that guy's
there's a.
Oh no, that guy's still there.
Then there's a new.
You married your husband when you were at the.
So I got married when I was in college. Yeah, I got married when I was in college. And was happily married for 10 years. At Shawnee State. Got married while I was at Shawnee State. Yeah.
Shawnee's still around, doing well. Looks like.
Okay.
So just so you know.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yes.
Good
thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Clearly, the alumni group hasn't found me for donations.
Not real well, because you seemed like they would really, really grab onto you. I think I feel like they would really be like,
this will be the breakthrough.
It'll be a great story. Yeah, great story.
Right.
You should go. You should reach out.
Yeah, so,
I think they would love you.
Yeah, I should give them a little bit of money or something. Anyway, so let's see. I lost my first. I don't know if you know this story, but I actually lost my first husband to cancer. We were happily married for 10 years. He had a son who's technically my stepson, so that's my oldest, Daniel. And then my youngest son, Cameron, Derek and I had together. So we have two boys, Daniel and Cameron. And so I lost him in 2006. And then so it was right after that I did the Epic project for King's Daughters. So Cameron was probably 8-9 years old. Daniel was in high school. So
wow, that's
different time of life for sure. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about that if you want to go down that rabbit hole.
You don't have to talk about it, but I mean, you tell us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. I mean, it's been a long time ago. He was an amazing man, and I still miss him every day. And the boys, Daniel has Derek's personality, and Cameron looks like him, is built like him, tall and skinny. And yeah, I think, I certainly wouldn't wish that on anyone, but I do think that it is times of suffering that we sometimes find our greatest life lessons and find ourselves. And so I definitely think that while I wouldn't go back and, I certainly wouldn't wish for it, wouldn't wish for it for myself, wouldn't wish for it for my kids or for anyone else. I think that,
Right.
there can be good things that come from suffering. So it's a weird feeling,
Yeah.
right? To feel good about suffering, but that's kind of life when you get to the other side of it, right?
No, I mean, everyone has loss of some sort, right? And significant loss usually. And we just, at our last forum, we had this guy named, he's a professor at Cal Berkeley come talk. He does all the research behind awe and wonder, which is now becoming like, there's all this like scientific research coming out that basically finding awe in your life is like one of the most important things for you, both physically and mentally. He was the lead science advisor behind the movie Inside Out. Like he was the guy
Oh,
behind.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So he's friends with the guy at Pixar, and so he'd go there and like consult with them. So he saw a lot about that, but that was interesting. But one of the things he said was there's like basically how many types, Tina? Was it like 6 types of awe? He just
I want
kind
to say
of
it was
walked
7,
through a
but
bunch of those.
yes.
7. But one of them is that like there's this is part of like loss, right? Like death could bring up those things where they're really hard and terrible, right? But like also that there's moments in it where it's like it brings up awe because of just the sheer nature of it. Because as Americans,
Yeah.
I think we tend to like he was saying we tend to just put it aside. Like,
Yeah.
don't think about it. Don't do anything with it. Just move on.
Well, I think also, Western civilizations tend to think things or in the context of or, like black and white. Things are either good or bad. And Eastern philosophies and cultures really tend to embrace that things can be both at the same time. So you can have good and bad at the same time, right? And
Yeah.
I definitely ascribe to that. And I think if we don't have suffering and darkness, then we don't know what the light is, and we don't know, how to feel joy if we don't feel sadness. And so, I'm all about just kind of embracing and accepting all things. And I try to bring that into my daily life at home and at work and how I interact with the people on my team and lead the organization in that, things are what they are, and we have to just kind of deal with them and move forward and not get emotionally wrapped around the axle, right? We just, okay, this is where things are, and how do we improve either the situation, or how do we celebrate this really great thing that just happened, and whatever it is. But life happens, and if we get ourselves out of the position of evaluating whether it's good or bad, it just is, then you kind of free yourself from some of those really negative emotional places where you can get stuck.
Do you think you've always kind of philosophically felt this way, or is this something like you've kind of learned through the experiences you've had? Because my feeling just talking to you is like you kind of always had this in you, and maybe this brought it out, but I could be entirely
think
wrong.
that I have always been a thinker and have always been kind of comfortable in my own skin, so to speak, and not really falling prey to other people's opinions, which I think can be the can be a recipe for disaster for your own mental health, honestly. So I think, mentally
Right.
I've been, I think I've kind of been a resilient person always, but I do think that, the loss of Derek and not wanting to become bitter or, I didn't want to be defined by being a widow at 30 years old, right? Like when people saw me, they saw me as a widow, and they saw as someone that, they needed to feel bad for. And I just didn't, that felt icky to
Yeah.
me. So I just wanted to, not let that define me and kind of define myself and create myself instead of, there's a, life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. I just kind of really latched onto that. And I think that the loss of Derek and going through, I mean, he and I had been together since I was 18 years old, and not really knowing how much of me was me and how much of me was him, after I lost him, really opened the door for a lot of self-exploration, which I think is a good thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think to your point, Tina, were there parts of my DNA that probably set me up to be this person? For sure. But it's the life experience, the people in my life that I've had over time, the way I, kind of focus on who do I want to be, both personally and professionally.
Right? You're making choices.
Yeah. Yeah. And yesterday we had Wednesday, we had our company town hall, and I try to always, read a quote, kind of set some intention at the beginning of those sessions. And Wednesday was greatness is a verb. Like, it is the choice of every minute of every day. Like, how are you being great in this moment, in this situation, in this, at this time with these people? And we're not 100%, right? We have to give ourselves grace, but really setting the intention of how can I have greatness in this moment is something that I try to aspire to.
Well, now I'm in love with Sarah.
Oh,
now I'm going to have to just spend more time with Sarah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I love it. Well, we went down a very interesting path, Ben. Where would you like to go from here?
I don't know. I mean, I think I just, I appreciate so much telling the story. I think what happens so often is that people, we find this at our events, my forum events. More recently, we've done just different types of things. Like, we did this thing at Awe. It brings out, like, that people aren't alone in things. You're telling a story that's, like, unique to you, but also, like, lots of people listening right now are going to have that same experience. And they might be in it right now. They might be in the middle of it. And I think what a gift to give. It feels like a gift for you to even tell it. I wonder, my thought actually was, like, how often do you tell that story? Because that to me is like, I don't want to bring it up, but, like, you need to tell it all the time. I just think very interesting, like, it's worth, there's a gift there of, like, being like, you're not alone. Like, that to me felt like you have gone through it, and people are going to go through those things.
I think
is great.
It's a good question. I mean, I am not afraid to tell it. I don't shy away from telling it. I think it has to feel organic. Like, what's the right audience at the right time to tell it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not rolling it out on a keynote moment.
Right. Like, well, and it, because to be honest with you, like, as soon as I say, I was a widow at 31 years old, like, it changes the energy of the room.
Yes.
Right. And so I'm very sensitive to that. Like, are we here to talk about that? I'm happy to talk about it.
Right.
I would love to pour into somebody else from my own experience and encourage them in a moment of darkness. But if that's not what we're here to do in this situation, then I don't want to go there just because I want to go there. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah. No, it's good.
Well, and I think
it's
the way
awesome.
that you described, that you don't want that even when it was happening, when it was present, you didn't want those feelings of pity or poor Sarah. You
Right.
wanted to find your own way through it and come out the other side, whole the way that you have. So I think there's probably some remainder of that tied to that story.
Sure.
Right.
That's right. And I would also say one other comment that I would like to make about, like, how that experience shaped who I am today. And that is, it is a very interesting sociology study when you are a widow at 31 years old and how the people around you react to that. And what I discovered is there are people, first of all, that have an opinion of what grief should look like. And
Absolutely.
And if your grief doesn't look like what they think grief should look like, they're very judgmental about that. And so I found in some cases a great deal of love and patience and support. I also found people being ugly about my grief, which was such a fascinating experience. Like how is my grief somehow about you? Like I don't really understand. And so I learned a lot about how we really, unless we are intentional and have kind of trained our brains, the average person is just the center of their own universe, and they really struggle with how to think about somebody else, right? Like, hey, maybe just go to this person. So back to, Ben, your points about like helping people through it. Like, it's not about how I feel, or it's not about my experience. Right now, it's about how you feel and your experience. And is there anything I can do to help you through that? Like, do you need love? Do you need a distraction? Do you need somebody to just sit with you when you cry? Do you need somebody to tell you that it's okay to feel happiness and you're not, you shouldn't feel guilty, or, all those kinds of things. And so it has really helped me be intentional about meeting people where they are versus always starting with, well, this is where I am, so you need to come to me and
do these things and you should be fine. It's like, no, that's not how it works. So I think Brene Brown says it, climb into the pit with them. Don't try to pull them
that's
out.
Right.
Just get into the wherever they're at. They don't have to have the words. In fact, saying stuff usually is stupid. You just do it's what I mean. How many people said stupid stuff to you during that time?
So many
bad things, right?
And what was even more fascinating is that the fear of saying something stupid caused people to avoid me. Right. So not only did I lose my husband, I lost a lot of my circle of friends because they didn't know what to do. So they just kind of stayed away from me, right? Because it was about how they felt. And anyway, so I try to just, even if you just say, I have no words of comfort except to say that I love you, or I'm here for you, or I know this has to suck, right? This has to suck. Whatever you're feeling is okay. And then check in on people. I think that it's really, really hard when you're in a dark place to reach out for help. And people have different feelings about accepting help. I'm not very good at that, to be honest with you. And
start a club. Sarah and I are going to start it's hard for me to ask and accept your help club.
It's just
very long
really, really hard. Really, really hard.
Sense of it.
And so just to kind of just say, hey, what's on your plate today? Is there, do you want, can I spend 20 minutes with you? Or, how can I get involved in your day to day that may make it better? Versus waiting on somebody to reach out, because it's really, really hard when you're in a dark place to reach out.
Do you think because you had the boys that it made it, I'm sorry, that you're having children helped you kind of work through the grief process, because you can't have it be all about you when there's kids involved?
I think it just added a different layer of complexity, because it is really hard to show up for someone else when you are suffering so much yourself. So that was really hard. And then knowing what to do for kids that have lost their dad, right? Like, so it's not just about my grief, it's about their grief, and how can we best, just rally together as a family and all those things. So it's hard. There's just no way around it. It's hard, and you make mistakes, or you look back and say, oh, I probably should have said this or shouldn't have done that. And, I tell the kids now, they're adults, right? I'm like, I'm so sorry for whatever I did. That wasn't right.
I've had that conversation. Sorry. My son is 23, and he moved to Wisconsin a couple of years ago. And before he left, he was like, he sat down at the table and he was like, you were a terrible mother. And I was like, listen, man, I was doing the best I could with what I had. That's all. Like, my heart was always with you, and I'm sorry you feel that way, and that it was not great for you, but that's all you can do is the best you can.
And I say, hey, you know what? I made a lot of mistakes, but I, to your point, Tina, it was with love, and if go see a good therapist. There's work through that. I'm happy to pay for it, right? Like whatever.
I'm happy to pay for
it.
I'll fund your therapy.
Exactly. Right. I actually take all three of them. All three of the children go to therapy.
I'll pay for it.
I'm fully funding a lot of that. Yes. Exactly.
For sure.
For
It
sure.
makes me think of this time after my mom died, which was just 6 years ago, died suddenly.
Sorry.
It's it's life, but I got
Mm-hmm.
recommended this book. It's called Confessions of a Funeral Director, and
Hmm.
it was incredible. I mean, on so many levels, just so incredible. But one of the things that he talked about, because he was just being around death all the time, and seeing, and he said the same thing you did, where it's like grief doesn't look like anything like you imagined it would. It's different for everybody. But he was also basically like the person who came up with like the grief cycle. They've since kind of proven that that's not really how it works. Like it doesn't work that way. It was really
The
he said
stages,
something
right?
like,
Yeah, it's
yeah, the
not
stages of
linear.
grief.
It's not linear.
It's not linear, and not everyone goes through all these stages. And he said basically it's a way for us to control it. The reason that it
Mm-hmm.
resonates with people and they know it is like they think they can control it. So this is another way to control what isn't controllable. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was really fascinating. Just that giving people freedom to be like, it doesn't, like, that's a myth now. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
real. And time doesn't heal all wounds. And those are things people say, but like that doesn't, it makes it maybe a little easier, but it doesn't like change it. So it just, I don't know, that
Well,
was really fascinating for me.
you don't ever get over it. You grow around it,
Right,
right? And I think that is
right.
just like this, does time afford us the ability to heal? Of course, right? So there is healing over the course of time. Should you decide that you want to heal over the course of time, right? Not everybody wants to heal. Some
Right.
people want to
That's
hang
right.
on to that.
That's
And
right. I
so
agree.
anyway.
That's very
No,
insightful.
that's
I agree
great.
with you. I think a lot of people, they want to live in that, like
Yeah.
roll around in that muck for a little bit longer.
For sure.
Personally, not for
sure.
And
me.
that's
But
their thing. If that's okay. Like it's some
right.
freedom to be like, if that's what they need to do, that's what they need to do. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
no, I thank you so
That's
much for
right.
sharing. I'm sorry
Yeah.
if that was uncomfortable. We can certainly cut this part out. Like we
No.
don't need to
Right.
share
It's
this.
so insightful,
No,
though.
I don't mind at all. And at the end of the day, it is who I am. It's a huge part of my DNA today, and I'm happy to share it. And to be honest with you, I did a lot of work to get to this place, and I'm really proud of the work that I
Right.
did, and very thankful for the people that helped me through it at that time. And I just encourage people to do the same. Like in some ways you have to get in the muck in order to heal. And so it doesn't make me feel bad. It's actually oddly something I'm really proud of, because I think I did some of the hard things. We can do hard things,
Yeah.
right? We can
Yes,
do hard
we
things.
can.
All right, so we got to move transition somehow. Um, all right, so going back
Well,
to you and your story. Oh, you were gonna say something. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the easier transition is all of this turns into, leadership skills and how much of leadership. And I think, Ben, I don't know if you've seen, I got a chance to do a TED Talk in Cincinnati years ago about how leadership
Yep.
is really about that individual connection, right? Leading someone from one mental or emotional place to another. And I think that all of this story that we've been telling is a lot of why I believe that to be true and what I have experienced in my life. And we're all in these positions of leadership, whether formal or informal, and how doing that work on yourself and thinking about how to meet people where they live is just such a key element of how we interact professionally and drive cultures inside of our organizations.
Yeah,
But
that
anyway,
was
we
that
can
was
go back to my story.
no, that was great. No, I mean, and that was an honor. Like, right? That was probably like a result of all the work you've
Oh,
done.
yeah. Yeah, the TED experience was an amazing experience. So, Colt, he really kind of pressured me into auditioning, which I'd never done anything like an audition before.
You had to audition for that? I guess I
And
didn't know that.
oh yeah. Yeah, so the it was a women's so the Cincinnati TED group does a women's session every year. And they tend to have their card kind of already filled with local Cincinnati well-known people, right? So like Jeff Ruby's daughter was, on the list, and a chef in town. Anyway, so they only had like 2 open spots, and like 150, 180 people applied for these spots. They whittled it down to 26, and then I had to go and audition, like had to do a live audition with the other 25 people in order to be selected. And so anyway, it was such an honor to even get to go, but then to be able to do it, and the way that, just I had so many people, like when you talk about like when people show up for you, the audience was so full of people that came to support me, that it was one of those moments in my life that just is so touching. Like you're like, oh my gosh, like people bought their tickets, they drove to downtown, they suffered with parking,
Flew
and
in,
they showed up for me.
right?
Yeah, a lot of
Right.
people flew in. My parents drove in. Like my aunts were in the audience. Like it, and to be able to
Make you cry.
like see all of these people just show up for me. Like if nothing else happened, I will carry the memory of that night for the rest of my life, because it was so amazing. And then stayed. And then after the show, like I came down the stairs, and there were like 40 people in the lobby, like, waiting for me, and it was so good. Like it was, wow, what a moment. It was so great. So great.
That's awesome. It's
That's
making me
awesome.
cry. Like I'm just over here
Yeah,
crying
Tina
because
crying.
I cry. It's what I do.
Mm.
It's part of my gift. No, I just think like when you see with like that level of support, I just think if it was happening, I'd be crying then too.
Yeah.
But I just love hearing that, I love people showing up. That's so incredibly meaningful, because that's what it's about, right?
It is.
Ben
It is.
builds communities. That's what he does.
That's right.
Right? To create people to show up. Like it fills my heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And we tend to focus on all the negatives, but just being super intentional and with a heart of gratitude of all the amazing things that people do for each other, and it's just so great.
It's interesting that I'm thinking now, it's like, oh, I was really cynical at the beginning of this. And I think you have a way of like putting it in perspective. It's always about perspective, right? Like the people that work at the payers are all people too, and they're coming through the same thing you are.
Yeah. That's right.
And it is, you have to go back to like, maybe they're in a system that sucks, or their culture is not great or whatever it is, but that isn't, if I learned anything in my creative days, which just there you would know something about, is like, there were amazing people there. And what I've learned over time is I do not hold how they behaved against them, because it was a culture that was like, you did those things. And I've learned over time is like, those people aren't actually that way. It was more of a culture that would kind of push them to be maybe not very nice sometimes, and it was like, because I've hung out with tons of those people since, and it's like, they're not anything like what, we were in this like terrible culture, but it's also like, they're people, and perspective on the whole thing is helpful.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what business you're in the business of people. And
absolutely,
if we can align on what are we here to do, what is our purpose, right? Both are, and I think a lot of times when we talk about work-life balance as an example, we tend to compartmentalize, like this is who I am at work and this is who I am at home. And I personally have found that the better recipe for me is work-life fluidity. Like I am the same person, and I perform best in both worlds when I can be myself, when I can share stories about, whatever I'm experiencing. I can share my thoughts openly in a way that's positive and encouraging, right? And move, whether it's, something that's going on at home or something that's going on at work, like move that conversation forward in a positive way. Like that's how the best outcomes happen. And so to your point, Ben, I mean, I think toxic cultures encourage people to just be maybe something they're not, or go about work in a way that is not productive. And I always say, like,
Right.
I love to work hard. I don't like it when it's hard to work. Like, that is a very stressful situation. And so I'm very focused on trying to create a culture where people feel empowered and they feel enriched and they feel like, they're in charge of their 20 square feet. What good thing can you do today in your 20 square feet? Whether it's on your team, whether it's across the aisle with a provider, across the aisle with a payer. And if we could just all rally around that, I just think, work could have a very different feel to a lot of folks.
Mhm. It feels like almost like I feel like Brene Brown's movement around vulnerability, which was just not just her, but it was like that, and then the pandemic, right? Like we had to basically, like, those things got intermingled more than ever because you're working from home. Like you're probably at home right now, right? You're working from
I am
home
home.
and
I am
home.
home.
Yeah, so it's like those all kind of started to come to fruition where it was like there almost feels like a permission to be like, okay, yeah, I'm not dressed up today. Remember that? Remember how everyone was like, they're in
Mm-hmm.
pajamas
Yeah.
because that's
I'm
just
sorry.
life
Yeah.
right
Right.
now. It Just feel like it like fast forwarded like the permission around kind of it's okay that those things can mix together because they were mixing already. Like if you think
That's right.
about it's changed so much in the last 20, 30 years. I mean, so much. But in the last 5,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably changed exponentially. Just very
Well,
interesting.
and I think that as a culture, as a society, we expect more from work, right? Like we want to hit the pinnacle of self-actualization. We're beyond security, right? Which is where a lot of generations before us were like, I
Right.
just want a job to pay the bills. And now we're like, no, I want to hit the pinnacle. And I expect my job, my employer, my day-to-day work environment to help me achieve this self-actualization. And um, I'm all for it. I mean, I think it's great. I think we have to engage in different conversations to get there, and people need to do the work on themselves to figure out what does that mean for them. But anyway, that's a
No,
whole
it's totally
it's a whole
true.
other rabbit
My
hole we
my
could
my
go down.
father-in-law, like my father-in-law worked for he worked for the hospital for like 29 and a half years. Same one, same thing. He was a lab director. And then they let him go. 29 and a
Hmm.
half years. Man, director of the lab, right? But in his mind, that's where he's working the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And then that shook everything up. And I'm thinking, and at the time, I remember going through it, and like that was like hard. It was hard to watch. It was hard to,
Hmm.
because he's like, this is the way it works. This is the way my parents like they worked
Hmm.
in the same place. My grandfather worked at Michigan Bell, like the now AT&T, right? Like he laid phone
Hmm.
lines for 50 years. Like your mom was at the librarian, right? Same thing.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah. Yeah.
our lives now, like our kids, they're not doing that. None of that's happening. It's like finding the work at the right
No.
time, at the right place, at the
Hmm.
right time, which is, it could be a year, it could be 2 years, it
Hmm.
could be 5 years,
And
it could be, you know,
and work they enjoy, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
just I need a
right.
job to pay the bills. It's I want to enjoy the work that I do. I want to feel good about the work that I'm doing and my contribution. And it takes, I think, because of that, a lot of kids, it's taking them longer to figure out what that is. And we could go do a whole debate about college and whether, that's designed for kind of that self-discovery that I think kids need to do. But anyway,
It's not. It's most likely.
it's not.
Or it's not forgiving, I
Well,
should say. It's not
Ben has ended
forgiving.
that debate. He's like,
Yeah,
it's not.
it's not. It's
No, I
not.
mean, if you're gonna go into like very specific, I'm gonna be a nurse, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna be a lawyer. Like those require very specific things to go do. And but most
Hmm.
everything else doesn't require that. It doesn't require like a simple, I got my 4-year degree. It's like, okay, what did you
Yeah.
prepare you for? Like, and I think
Hmm.
if you, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to college to do, I don't even remember what, like, physical therapy. I didn't even know what that was. It was just hot at the time. It was like, okay, like this sounds fun. I get there and I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, I don't want to do this. That sounds terrible. And I'd probably change my
You're
major
like,
4 or 5
kinesiology?
times.
What?
Yeah, so I ended up with like a health science degree, and it does nothing for you, by the way, just so are all on the same page. Yeah, nothing. I ended up I had to go to master's school to go to health administration, and I found that by accident. It's like, who knew? All right, so Sarah, you found your way to this, you found your way over the years to this amazing job where you're CEO.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you probably a year and a half ago, and it was like, I'm at this cool place. And you weren't the CEO yet, but
No,
I think
I
you were
started
doing
as
that
the
job.
COO. Yeah.
Okay, I'm curious because I also started a company where I'm CEO, and that's weird. I felt it was weird. I don't know how you feel. And I don't know if you know this stat because I'm curious to what you think. When polled anonymously, the Fortune 100 CEOs would say that most of them, 70, like some number, like 72% don't feel like they belong. 72% of like
I didn't know
Fortune
that, but
100
that's
CEOs
interesting.
don't feel like they belong in the role and don't feel qualified. If they were honest, right? Like, this is anonymous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
was surrounding kind of imposter syndrome, which we've done a number of podcasts on. But I thought it was fascinating, feeling like, oh yeah, I could totally see that, where you're like, really, I should be in this spot. And I'm not saying you feel that way. I'm just feeling, how does it feel to be in that role now, kind of knowing like all the stuff attached to it, right? Like, it feels, for
Yeah,
me, it felt weird. That's
it's
why I would probably say.
it's I would say it's humbling. And it I feel a great sense of responsibility. And I think, to your point, Ben, like, I challenge myself every day to just get smarter and better. I don't know that I'll ever feel like, oh yeah, like I've got this. I've got this. Like, I don't ever feel that way. I always feel like I'm missing the mark somewhere, wherever that, even on the best days. Like, even on my best days when things are being hit out of the park, I'm like, oh, I didn't do that well, or I didn't do this well, or I should have thought further ahead in this regard, or whatever. And so I think, part of probably it would be an interesting study to see, because I do think that pursuit of greatness is probably, that DNA, that mindset is probably what contributes to our success, right? Because we aren't about ourselves. We aren't about, oh, I want this title because my ego needs it. It really, for me, it's like, I get up every day and think, what does my company need from me today? Like, who do I need to show up as every day? Who needs attention? What process needs attention? How can I get the right balance of being involved but empowering people? And it's just this constant dance. And fortunately, first of all, I have an amazing team. We laugh a lot. We genuinely like each other. We work really, really hard together. But I also have an amazing capital partner, which we can talk a little bit about that. And I have, a couple of board members that I can call and say, here's the situation. Here's how I'm thinking about it. You've been here, they've got so many years of experience as CEOs in their own right. Like, how do you see it? And we have some really great dialogue where I don't feel like I have to have all the answers. I feel like my job is to ask the right questions to the right people to get to the best answer. And I think, I'm very fortunate that I have a group of people that I can do that with very easily and in a non-judgmental way.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's so true, right? You kind of have to just keep pushing along and doing the best you can, doing the best you can in those moments. Yeah. And I think for me, I've had to like accept the role where, I've been on my own for 8 years. So it's like and Tina knows this. It's like, I don't know. I'm not reporting to anyone. No one's reporting to me. Like, Tina and I work together on some things, but right. She doesn't report to me. Like, I'm not giving a review. So I don't know. It just felt much different for like and then to move into what I'm doing at Tarpon, where I have a team and I have a COO who's amazing and a team that's amazing. But it's like they all look to me to like have sometimes like, okay, what do we do? And sometimes I'm like, well, I guess we'll do, guess we'll do this.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well,
We'll try it.
so
We'll try it. If
yeah,
it
it is
doesn't work, we'll do
interesting to
something
kind of go
else.
into that role, right? Where it's like, okay, no,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm making a decision. And it's taken
I
a little
think
bit
it's
of time to
interesting.
accept it.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I have to always remember is in my mind, I'm just Sarah. Like I'm just Sarah. And for a lot of people, I'm the CEO. And there's a gravity that comes with my words and actions that I have to always keep at the forefront of my mind.
Hmm.
And that can be overwhelming, right? That can be overwhelming. And so to your point around like sharing and vulnerability and authenticity, like my hope is that people get to know me in such a way that they trust that whatever decisions are being made with the best of intentions. They may not always work out, but if people can just align to be like, based on the information that she has at the time, this is probably what seemed like the right decision.
Right.
That would be success for me, to be honest.
Or I said these words, but that's not what I was just joking. It's like that was even those things where it's like I was just joking, but
Yeah,
then they
I
took
was
it like, oh,
kidding.
well, they said this. I
Yeah.
have it on, I would like to say, I mean, I hate saying this, but it's like I'm a personality now, like out in space. So I have it even like more where it's like, oh, I heard you said this in the podcast. Like I'll get a text like that where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, whoa, like I don't remember saying that A and B, like it certainly wasn't
Hmm.
meant to, whatever. So I do think it's like, I think you're right. Like your words are much more powerful because of the position you're in. And trying to be
Hmm.
careful of that because people will take them in other ways.
Yeah. But I think the challenge with that is then we run the risk of not saying our truth.
Right.
And then that has consequences, right? So it's almost like this really fine line of feeling like you're being authentic and you're being honest and transparent and letting people, like if somebody wants to be offended, they're probably going to be offended, right? Like it's hard if you're not intentionally. I mean, there are people that like want to poke the bear. Like let's be honest, those people exist. But I think
Right.
I'm not that person. I know you're not that person, and so you kind of have to just, if somebody wants to be offended or take something in a certain way, you can certainly apologize. I'm sorry you took it that way. That was never my intention. But at the end of the day, I think we have to be brave enough to not let that keep us from being honest.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I try to, just like you said, I try to stay true to myself. It's like I'm being me.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like out in public, it might be hyper version of me, but it's still me. I'm still trying to be,
Hmm.
so it is interesting to kind of find a line. I totally agree. Uh, Sarah, how do people find you? Like, so if people want to reach out, they want to learn more about what you're doing, a trend, like
Yeah.
how do they do that?
I mean, certainly find me on
This is
LinkedIn. I
not a
get a lot
paid
of folks.
endorsement.
Yeah, I certainly get a lot of folks find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Armstrong. Trendhealthpartners.com is our website. I'm trying to get out and about at conferences and just, help have more of these conversations and do like Ben, try to take people from being like the cynic to, but what can we do here, right? Like,
Hmm.
let's just try to
That's
have a
right.
little bit better perspective. So find me at a conference, I'll be at ANI in Vegas. Just love the work that we're doing. Would love to. And I get all jazzed up. Like I still at my core am a revenue cycle nerd. Like I love to talk about revenue cycle things. And it was really funny when I started at Trend, we had a provider that was struggling with some false credits and just, kind of had a bunch of accounts that they were really struggling with. And one of my leaders was asking me, and I'm like, oh, I know what this is. This is the PLB segment on their remit. Here's what they need to do, right? And so like I turned into like this revenue cycle consultant because it was super fun. So
Oh my God.
that's still like just in my DNA.
Hmm.
So we don't have to talk about payer provider collaboration, even though I'd love to. We can still just talk about good old fashioned revenue cycle best practices.
No, that'd
Take
be
the girl
perfect.
out of revenue
Awesome.
cycle. She can't take the revenue
Take
cycle
the
out of the
revenue
girl.
cycle
There
out
it
of the
is.
girl.
That's it. It's
Thank you,
true.
Tina.
It's
So
true.
we should
You're
put that
welcome.
on a bumper sticker or
I
something.
we've got a lot of t-shirts to make now. I feel like I'm going to be
I know.
busy. I
Exactly.
got to order my Shawnee State
Shawnee
College.
State. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You got to
hoodie
hook back up
for
with them,
fall.
man. They would love you.
I know.
Like CEO
Exactly.
coming out of Shawnee State. That's like
Like, let's get that TEDx talk on the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
what are they
Like, this
doing?
could be
They should
you.
be. They're not clearly
All
like,
over this.
capitalizing
Yeah.
on the
Oh.
alumni
You know,
networks.
Speaking of that, like it is funny because right after I did the TED Talk in December of 2019, and I had all of these speaking engagements. Like my high school asked me to come and do like all this kind of stuff, and then COVID happened, and it
All
just
got
all
canceled.
kind of all got canceled.
Let's
All
bring
gone.
it back.
So
Let's
we
bring
lost
it back,
a
Sarah.
little bit of the momentum, but that's okay. It's all right. I love it.
I just went back to talk today. My grad school asked me to come talk and teach on RevCycle, right? So do that talk. And it was awesome. It was super cool. It was cool to go back. And so it's fun,
So
to,
Ben
fun to
has
see
become
those
an
kids.
outlier. My favorite part of it is like Ben is like the outlier, which I'm like, yes, I love it.
Yeah, because
The outlier
I'm
in
a
what way?
non-traditional. Well, because health administration, I went to one of the oldest program in the country for health administration, and it's known to create CEOs of hospitals, right? And so I'm at Virginia Commonwealth University. And like the HCA, first HCA CEO came out, the founder came out of there. You know, like it's kind of very traditional program, right? I mean, it's amazing, top 5 school, right? It's like, but so when I got there, they were like, "What do you do?" You know, like they had no concept of it. It was like they just couldn't stop asking questions about like, "You run companies? You like build companies?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like I didn't do the, and so it was almost like telling them there's this other like way that isn't like the typical. This is also the challenge with education, right? It's like, well, this is the way it works. I'm like, no, like it doesn't have to be that way, right?
Yeah.
I ended up in revenue cycle, and those guys don't even get taught it hardly. They do 4 semesters of finance. They both didn't. I went through 2 hours of Rev Cycle 101, Sarah, and it was like people are like, "What happens?" I was like, exactly.
Totally. I was at a wellness retreat a couple years ago, and it's a great experience. I could do a plug for going and just doing that self-care and a wellness retreat. I find it to be just so wonderful for physical and mental health. But anyway, it's a small setting. There's like 40 women, and we take our meals together, right? We do lunch together, we do dinner together.
Sure.
And I was sitting at a table with several ladies, and they got on the topic of healthcare, and I'm just like eating my salad, just not saying anything, and they start debating some political whatever, and all this kind of stuff, and I sat there for as long as I could until finally I was like, okay, so like that's not how any of that works, right? Like, and so I gave at this table with 5 other women, I gave like a little speech about, okay, well, here's what happens when claims go to like, and denials, and they were, they were like, I have learned more in the last 10 minutes about healthcare than I've learned in 20. I'm like, I know, like this is like this weird part that people don't talk about, and I find it so fascinating. And once, like you said, Tina, like once people get into it, like you can take the girl out of the revenue cycle, but you can't take the revenue cycle out of the girl. Like there's just something about it that's so compelling, and the challenges of it, and we love it. We love it once we're in it.
It's very much a niche. I always describe people like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in a very niche part of healthcare." It's like you probably don't know anything about it. It's like, okay,
yeah, so true. And I always ask people, like, when you're in the revenue cycle, how do you introduce yourself at a party? When people ask you, what do you do for work? What do you say? You say you're in a niche part of healthcare?
I say, I started some companies. They're in the finance part of healthcare. It's very niche. And they were like, and if they know something more, right? And they know something more, they're like, well, what part of
the
healthcare?
finance part
And
of
I'm always
healthcare.
like,
Yeah.
well, dude, I was on the bus the other day. I didn't tell Tina this. I was on the bus to go get my car from the airport. This is no joke. And some lady looks at me, and just totally full of people. Clearly, I'm like coming back from stuff. And she looks at me and she goes, I know you from somewhere. And I was like, so I was like, I don't. And she turned out she does work at a hospital in like Lansing at Sparrow. And I was like, I mean, maybe, we couldn't figure out how she knew me, but I was like, this is like, she's like, what part of healthcare do you work in? I'm like, well, the finance part, it's just like, if she kept asking more questions, I could like maybe tell her revenue cycle, but you can't start off with that. People are like, what is
Nobody
that?
knows what that is.
See,
Nobody knows
Nobody
what
knows
that
what that
is.
is.
because maybe because I don't have a hang up on it. I always I had getting some new windows, everybody. So the window guy was
Oh,
here. And
boy.
he's like, so what exactly do you do that you're like here at home, whatever. And I said, well, I have a marketing company, but I have, I work, and I think I was talking about forums. So I was like, oh, I help run a twice annual conference for revenue cycle. And he's like, well, what's revenue cycle? I'm like, well, it's how money flows through a hospital. Like, so I just always that's how I say, like, how money flows through a hospital.
Yeah.
Like, and then I stop. And everyone's
It's
like,
pretty
oh,
accurate.
like that's how I just land the plane. Like,
Yeah.
I don't,
Land
because
Yeah.
otherwise I'm like, it could get real complicated, and I don't think I'm prepared for that complicated conversation. So I just go simplicity.
Makes
Healthcare
sense.
finance, like that feels like a plane I could not land. So
Yeah. Awesome.
I go straight in.
All right, Sarah, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for being vulnerable
Yeah,
and
thank
you.
telling us your story.
Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you.
Tina and I are going to be besties after this.
We are. Like,
That's
Yeah.
right.
be prepared for that LinkedIn. It's coming right now.
All right, Ben,
Oh,
thank
wow.
you for
Okay.
the invitation, and this has been just a great way to start my Friday. So
Your long holiday weekend.
yeah, long holiday weekend. It's always a pleasure spending time with Ben. I love
Aw.
just what you're doing and your sense of community and all those things. So I'm just honored to be a part of it and looking forward to seeing you again.
All right, sounds good.
Well, I'll see you in Vegas because I'll be there. I think Ben
So
will
will
be there.
I.
We'll be in Vegas.
So,
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds
Boom.
good. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great weekend.